Hello and welcome to Authors at Google. I am super excited to be here today to introduce Profit from the Positive. And I'm not just saying that because I read the book and learned that it's best to start with a sizzle. I'm saying that because the book is actually quite excellent. I'm a researcher here at the People and Innovation Lab at Google, where my job is to find new ways to use social science to create one of the best places to be a creative worker. And in my role here, I am constantly looking for new googly ways to make our company a more amazing place to work. And it is my pleasure to be introducing this talk because this book is full of ideas on how to do just that. Senia Maymin, an executive coach and founder of 2 startups, and Margaret Greenberg, founder of the consulting and coaching practice, the Greenberg Group, have scoured the research and come up with concise answers to the question, how can we get people to perform at their best? And their answer is by identifying, cultivating, and using their strengths every day. Creating roles, work relationships, and organizations where people can do that while under intense pressure to innovate is not easy, and this book isn't the silver bullet, but it does offer a silver lining. Creative new ways of approaching day-to-day management challenges by focusing on what drives employee engagement. I look forward to learning more. Join me in welcoming Senia and Margaret.
Hello, hello. Hello, Google. We're very excited to talk to you about the book and specifically to give you 3 tools that you can walk away with. As you see in the subtitle of the book, we have Boost Productivity, Transform Your Business. So you're literally going to walk out of here with tools to help you amp up your productivity and your influence. The book has a few different components that you may have already heard about, but basically it takes the latest research, just like Mary Kate just said, and it uses over 30 practical tools. And one thing that you'll see throughout, and you'll see throughout what we're telling you, is that there are real-life case studies. Both what Margaret and I have experienced as we've been executive coaches and have worked with people who want more productivity, who want more influence. And as an aside, we actually often find that the people who want to be most productive are those people who already are. So when we ask people, what do you really want to do? The ones who say, I want more productivity, they tend to already be more productive. As an example of the real life case studies, you'll see that in the book, in chapter 5, we have, which is the hiring chapter. The first part is what you can do for yourself, and the second part of the book are common problems, common issues, such as hiring, how to bring out the best, performance reviews. So you will see that we feature Google highly in the hiring chapter. I mean, what other company has a term like googly? That is just really neat that you think about and hiring in a specific way that's very specific to you. The other example of a very strong company that does that is Zappos, and for them the word is more weird. More weird is what's important to them, but not too weird, not too little weird. So it's very important to think about culture, and you'll see that in the chapter 5 section. Today, what are we really talking about? We're talking about getting more done, but without necessarily working more hours. So what can we do? Before we do this, I want to tell you a little bit about what is this thing that is our time pressure to succeed. Americans work 8 hours more per week than Germans, but we are no more productive, unfortunately. If you look around the room, 7 of the 10 people around you will tell you that work is a major source of stress. Maybe not here, maybe not at Google, as there are a lot of people working on it, but this is a national statistic. There has been a time diary study done by sociologists since 1965 that literally has measured what do people do and how do they spend their time. And from 1965 until today, we have only 1 additional hour of free time. Now, how great or not great is that? We have great technology. We have multiple ways that we can get more time, but we're not getting that much more time. So if you liked listening to music in 1965, and you like listening to that same music now, you only have 1 more hour to do it. This is a major concept that Margaret and I talk about with every single company that we have worked with, which is flip-flop costs. You may be more familiar with the term as multitasking. We all do it, I do it, you do it, everybody multitasks. The part about multitasking that you may not know about is multitasking can be fine, but it's the switching cost, that flip-flop cost, so flipping from one project to another, and that's the part that actually decreases your productivity by 40%. The book is called Profit from the Positive. We want you to profit financially, emotionally, mentally from these tools that you're going to walk out of here with. But what is this positive thing that we have there? So I'll tell you first what it's not. I'm going to give you the bartender's guide to positive psychology. So when people see the word positive, they often think, oh, smiley faces. They think this is a rosy-eyed view of the world. Sometimes people will think, oh, that is, and that should be the glass half full mentality. But no, it's actually the disturbing the water part of the glass. That's what we think positive psychology is. Positive psychology is an academic study, and it's basically saying, okay, glass half full, there's the water level, but how can we study that water level? How can we figure out what really does make people optimistic? What really does make people more resilient? Another thing that people sometimes say about positive psychology is, oh, you mean that kind of thing where I sit around doing gratitude mantras and I try to really make lemonade out of lemons? And we say, no, please don't necessarily try to do that. One of the things that you may very well want to do is you may want to take just part of that lemon and squeeze it into a lime drink. Do something totally different. So not necessarily that positive means smiling and always good. One thing that you will not walk out of here with is you will not walk out of here with this attitude that I now feel more positive about my productivity, and therefore I am. That's not what's going to happen. So now that I've told you all these things that positive psychology is not, what is positive psychology? It's basically the study of what's right. What do I mean by that? It's the study of what's right in relationships, in personal fulfillment, in business, in productivity. And it's when you look at those things that are working. So let me give you an example. Take off your Google hats for a moment and put on your architect hat. So pretend that you are a bridge architect and you are out to make the best bridges that you can possibly make. You have at least two different things that you can do. You can look at all the bridges that have fallen and collapsed and are not standing and the suspension has gone wrong. Or you can look at all the bridges that have withstood the test of time, that have been standing for decades, centuries, maybe thousands of years. Now, one thing we're saying is don't not study the bridges that have collapsed. That's a very, very important thing to do. We're good at problem solving. That's an important thing to do. But also, look at the bridges that have withstood the test of time. Why? Because you're not going to learn the same lessons from both. So researchers in social psychology have studied bad marriages, and they found that in bad marriages there are a lot of arguments. So you might make the conclusion that you might want to not have arguments in order to have a good marriage. But researchers have studied good marriages, and they found that in good marriages there are a lot of arguments. It's just how do you get past the arguments? How do you resolve them? So what we're saying is also study the strong bridges. These three tools, I'm going to give you a shortcut, and they won't mean anything to you right now. But at the end, they'll mean everything to you. Trick yourself, free, which is actually free, and that means don't be an expert. Let's start with trick yourself. This is what we hear as executive coaches. We hear our clients who are already highly successful people saying to us, I'm stuck. I'm not sure how to start, or saying to us, it's important. I know this thing is important, but I just get too busy working on other things. So what do we tell them to do? One of the things that we try to put into their toolkit is this. Imagine that you are in an experimental room and a social psychologist has come up to you and has said, this is how we'll run this experiment that you've agreed to participate in. I'm going to give you 20 activities, one by one. Each one of them will take about 3 to 5 minutes, and I want you to do them as I bring you new ones. So I might ask you to make a puzzle. I might ask you to make a clay figure. Say I'll give you some yellow and brown clay. I might ask you to fold a cardboard box. I might ask you to do some different activities. Now, unbeknownst to you, as you start this experiment, at some point, the experimenter will come in and will actually interrupt your activity and tell you that it's time to go on to the next one. So it might be that you're doing an anagram, and the experimenter comes in and says, okay, that's enough, let's go on to the next one. Or it might be that you're doing a crossword puzzle or Legos, and the experimenter comes in and says, let's move on. Now here's a question for you. At the end of the experimenter will ask you to remember, which ones do you remember? So he'll actually say, do you remember the ones that you were interrupted? He'll say, which ones do you remember? And I want you to list them. So my question to you is, do you think you're more likely to remember the interrupted ones? And let's say the jigsaw puzzle, the little giraffe, and the anagrams are the interrupted, and the other ones are the completed. Or do you think you're more likely to remember the completed ones? Interrupted. So let's get some comments. Why? Why did somebody say interrupted? Why? Your brain is still working on them. What else? More disturbing? How disturbing? Not done yet. I want to do something else. Your brain is working on them. It's more disturbing. Who has a comment on the completed ones? That you spent more time on them? This whole room votes interrupted, yes? This whole room is entirely right. The interrupted tasks were remembered so much so that the room is high-fiving each other, just for the record. They were remembered so much so that they were remembered 90% of the time more than the completed tasks. Now, that's a little bit funny. I know the room doesn't think so, but it's a little bit funny because you actually had the chance to spend more time on the completed tasks. What's happening? It's exactly what the two people here in the front said. It's that when you leave things unfinished, really the way that the experimenter described it is there's a tension. There's a tension in your head. That's unfinished. How do I get back to it? It's still rolling around in your head. Now, if you're at a cocktail party and you want to be really snazzy, this is called the Zeigarnik effect for the researcher who created it. So the fact that you want to come back to things that were unfinished. Let's take you to a different place, car washes. Who needs to go to a car wash? I needed to last week. Car washes. Suppose you have one of these two sets of car washes. You've gone to a car wash, you've driven by, you've gone to a car wash, and you think, okay, I got a car wash here. And at the end, the person at the car wash gives you a coupon. The person gives you either this coupon, so this coupon has eight little places that you have to stamp before you can get the 9th free car wash, or the person gives you this coupon, in which there are 10 places to stamp before you get the 11th car wash, but notice that the first two are stamped out. Another question for you. In which one of these do you think you would go all the way and go to all, in effect, 9 car washes to get your free car wash? So the one with the 2 stamps. Why? They give you something. Almost like something free?
Yeah, they give something free.
Okay.
I agree, but I think the reason that I would say because the process already started, so leaving the second one would feel like wasting the 2 car washes.
So there's a comment that it feels like you're wasting the 2 car washes that you didn't actually do, but that you may be wasting. Did you have a comment here?
Yeah, that's
Similar comment. And what did you want to say? The decision has been made for you. You don't need to get over any mental hurdle. You guys are right on. So either you've read the book or you're right in line with the thinking of the psychologist. Basically, 300 people, about 150 in each group, went through. 19% of that group where they had to get 8 stamps and to get the free 9th one, 19% of that went all the way through. Of the other group, 32%. So there's something about having started. There's something about that. We'll give you an example of something we see in our coaching. We see that when somebody needs to put a presentation together or put a report together, sometimes they'll just start and then step away from it. So literally plan that they will step away from it. They kind of trick themselves. Or something that's in the book is one of our clients writes a to-do list, but she writes the first 2 items and immediately crosses them off. It's a little funny, right? It's kind of like you're very, very physically tricking yourself. So now a question for you. And I'll give you the very specific ways that you can approach the question. This is my favorite page in the book. It's page 17. It's the 5-1 smallest. It's just like all the things that you've described, but they're really 3 questions to be able to get yourself to that trick yourself state. 5-1 smallest. What can I do in 5 minutes? what can I do to move the project forward by 1%? And what's the smallest action I can take for the biggest impact? They're very simple questions, but sometimes simplicity can make us take a step forward. I'd like you to look around the room and choose somebody who you didn't walk in with, and to turn to that person, and I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes per person, and to turn to that person and to tell them what is a project. IDEO tends to do this. They tend to really, really trick themselves into getting started. What is a project? Let me just give you this. Today is Tuesday. For everybody watching online as well, today is Tuesday. It will always be Tuesday when you watch this presentation. This week, on what project do I need to trick myself into getting started? So you already know what that is. So tell a partner what that is, and ask yourself, and have the partner ask you, how can I apply this 5 minutes, 1% smallest action principle? Please go ahead in both ways, you and then the other person. Okay, let's come back. Who would like to share a trick yourself example? So either the project or what you've thought of that you can do to trick yourself. So I would love a couple of volunteers to share their project and what it is that you did that you thought to trick yourself in 5 minutes, 1% or smallest thing.
Okay.
This is Margaret.
I'm Margaret. Hi. One of the things we did is we wrote every Friday. We had a meeting at 1 o'clock Eastern, right? I'm on the East Coast.
Margaret's in Connecticut. I'm in California.
And so we had this meeting every Friday by phone. And what I would do is I would send Senia an email on all that I accomplished that day. Whether I rewrote a chapter or did a piece of research. But when did I write the email? I wrote it first thing in the morning at 7:30, as if I had already completed all those things. And then I hit the send button at 5 minutes before 1.
Wonderful. The comment is he was trying to do yoga and meditation every day, and he found it hard to commit to 90 minutes. So he told himself and started doing 1 minute per day, 60 seconds. You've done it for months now. That's fabulous. There's some research that if you're trying to get into the habit of flossing your teeth, you really should just floss one tooth. It gets you started. Okay. This was trick yourself into getting started. And now we're going to move on to free. And here's Margaret with that.
Okay. Thank you, Senia. Thank you. So here we go, free. Frequent recognition and encouragement. And guess what? It really is free. And what we're talking about here is not formal recognition programs that most companies have. It's the informal recognition, the expression of appreciation. So what do we know about that? Well, I'll tell you a little story first. There was a company that I was coaching the president, actually here in California now that I think about it. And they had just acquired another company. And so we brought together the leaders from both companies, and we wanted to do an inventory of all the management practices that both companies had. And so he asked the head of HR from the other company, so what kind of management practices do you have to improve the performance of your employees? And the head of HR said, we have a progressive discipline process. So you can imagine I nearly fell off my chair when I heard that, right? So I thought to myself, well, imagine if we had a progressive feedback process. What might that look like? So we got curious. Actually, another colleague of mine, Dana Arakawa, who also went to UPenn with Senia and me, we got curious and decided to conduct a study. But think about it. Progressive discipline, that's like, do we have any golfers in the room? That's like hiring a golf pro who says just before every swing, don't miss, don't miss, don't miss, right? So we said there's got to be another way. So we wanted to conduct a study. So there was a company, another high-tech technology organization, part of a large financial services company. The CIO was curious too. Was there any link between giving frequent recognition and encouragement and the performance of that particular individual and team? So one of the things we often get from clients is they'll ask us, how do I get the most out of people? And we actually suggest that they ask themselves a somewhat different question. Not a question that sounds like you're trying to squeeze every last ounce out of an employee, right? How do I get the most? Instead, we suggest that they ask this question: how can we bring out the best? Now, you probably all know about some of the Gallup research around one of the ways to bring out the best is really to understand and know your strengths and get to use them every day. How many people have actually taken some kind of strengths assessment? Okay. How many people actually consciously apply their strengths every day? Great. Okay, keep working on it. Okay. Well, another way that you can really bring out the best is by giving frequent recognition and encouragement. And again, it's free. So this study was at a financial services company, technology department, about 900 technology employees, about a $100 million budget. And so we decided to see if there was any link between these positive practices like frequent recognition and encouragement and the results that they got. So what did we find out? Well, one of the things, and you probably know this working here at Google, technology people love to measure everything, right? In fact, I like to say, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? If you can't put it in a spreadsheet, they'll tell me, if it doesn't fit into a spreadsheet, Margaret, it doesn't exist. I'm like, well, maybe not. So we were curious. So we've conducted this study with about 155 IT folks. Some of them were project managers, architects, BAs, etc. And we wanted to see what the connection was. And the cool thing is they had 9 performance measures that we didn't even have to come up with. Performance measures such as, were they on budget? Were they on time, on schedule? And what about quality, the number of defects? And they had another handful of other performance measures as well. So we took a look at that, and we created a survey, and we asked questions such as, my manager regularly recognizes project milestones, and how frequent does your manager recognize performance? And some other follow-on questions as well. In fact, this particular survey is actually in the book, in the appendix, that you can take yourself and can also have others take it. So what did we find out? Well, we took the employees' answers to those questions and others, and we were able to actually rank the responses from those managers that received really high scores on frequent recognition and encouragement and those that scored really low. So we put it into the quartiles, high to low. And guess what we found? We now have the data. We actually saw a 42% increase in the team performance by those managers that scored in that top quartile for giving free than those that scored in the bottom. So it made a big difference, 42%. So why don't we do it then, right? Why don't we do either peer-to-peer more often or manager direct report? Why don't we do more of it? Well, there's a couple reasons why. One, we've been taught that there are other productivity tools. Are you familiar with like Lean Six Sigma and tools like that? Right? That to improve productivity, you have to measure the work, the process. Now, I wouldn't want you to walk out of here thinking that Senia and I aren't in favor of improving process. We are. In fact, I spent a good part of the 90s doing process reengineering, so I'm intimately familiar with it. However, you're missing out on a big part of the results equation when you don't also look at the worker. How can we improve performance through some of our practices? Negativity bias. That's a term psychologists use to describe why we don't do certain things, why we tend to look at the glass as half empty. Some evolutionary psychologists believe that for early man to survive, he had to be on the lookout, for that saber-toothed tiger, not a beautiful sunset. So we are often keen at finding fault. We are more apt to catch people doing things wrong than we are to catch them doing things right. Think about, you're all probably familiar with those customer service stats, where when we have poor service, we tell like 13 people, but when we have stellar service, we only tell 5. So we're kind of hardwired to look at what's wrong. So giving positive feedback doesn't come easily to some people. And then lastly, we've heard just about every excuse in our coaching practices on why people don't do it. And here are a couple of our favorites. I'm too busy. That's what they get paid to do. I don't like encouragement or need it to do my job. Then we show them the data. it's too early to celebrate. We hear this all the time, especially from technology organizations, that have these multi-million-dollar, multi-year projects. Well, we don't know if it's implemented yet, so, we got to wait. And no, don't wait. And then lastly, this is really one of our favorites. It'll go to their heads. It's like, come on, okay? So, yeah, the question is, how do you encourage more positive feedback, right? When it may not be part of the culture. And one of the things we talk about in Profit from the Positive is how to become a positive deviant, okay? And the fact that you're all here today, right here, probably tells us that you probably waver on that positive deviant side anyways. So our recommendation would be to just start doing it. There is something called, in psychology, the contagion effect, and it can work both positively and negatively. So the more we do it, it creates this contagion effect. Now, I will get into in a moment, you have to make sure it doesn't backfire, and that's what this slide is. You want to make sure that the frequent recognition and encouragement, there's some parameters around it, okay? So let's, so this is our backfire slide. Do we have any car enthusiasts in the room? Okay. So first, one way to prevent it from backfiring is make sure that you're giving process praise rather than person praise. So Carol Dweck, who some of you know from Stanford, has done a number of research studies around this. And what we mean by that is person praise is when we recognize someone with really general statements, like, Rebecca, you're really smart, or Faye, great job, right? Interesting thing that we found is, or that Carol has found, is that people that give person praise, it actually creates the sense of, or can create a sense of helplessness, and that they're afraid to lose that distinction. If we have anybody in the room that has kids, remember that, okay? I wish I knew this earlier in my motherhood. The second, think about it this way, process praise is when we praise someone by actually describing the process or the strategies they used in completing that particular project or whatever it is you're giving them feedback on. So that's an important concept to say, I really appreciate that you handed that you did that project for me or analyzed those reports for me, because I know you put in a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you have a lot of other things on your plate, so I really appreciate that. So whether that's peer-to-peer or manager to direct report, remember process praise, not person praise. Second, are you familiar with the term absent presence? Absent presence, it's what you do. Some of you might be doing it right now if you're on your iPhone. Taking notes. That's okay. It's when we, dial into that conference call and then we put the phone on mute and we catch up on email, right? Or it's when you're out to dinner with your spouse, lover, partner, friend, whoever, and you're texting while you're across from each other and you're really not present. You're physically present, but you're mentally absent. So when it comes to delivering free, it's, to your point, it has to be genuine. Yes, it has to be specific, but it needs to be genuine. And one way to be sure that it is that you're really present, you give eye contact, even if it's feedback you're giving remotely to somebody in another location or another country. Stop whatever you're doing, turn away from your computer if you're on the phone, and really deliver it. You can tell when people aren't present, even over the phone, even over the computer. And then lastly, praise to the back. This is a term that we learned from one of the guys we interviewed for Profit from the Positive. He's actually the co-founder and president of EverFi, who Google actually did early funding for. So EverFi is a DC-based, web-based curriculum for students, both middle school, high school, and college, where they teach kids how to financial literacy skills, and some other life skills, anti-bullying kind of thing. And one of the things he talks about at EverFi is it's easy to give people direct feedback, right, in an email or face-to-face. But oftentimes we forget about praising to the back. When you're in a meeting and you talk about somebody who isn't there, right? And it reverberates. It comes back to that person. Hey, I was in that meeting. They were talking about you, that you did this really great job on XYZ project. And, they were really talking about how valuable you are to the company. So praise to the back. All right, a couple other things. Some companies that we interviewed for the book and have told some stories around. EverFi is one. Zappos is another out in Las Vegas that Senia visited. And Joie de Viva, I'm better with my Spanish. Another, we interviewed Chip Conley. for the book, and as well as Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, and probably maybe Google too. We may add to this list. And this is a quote that we love from one of the people that we quote in the book. Using recognition is the best way to build a high-energy, fun culture and reinforce the behaviors that drive results. Why be selfish on the one thing that matters most to people? So with that, who have you been meaning to give a free to? Think about it for a moment. And again, turn to the person next to you. Have you been meaning to give a free to? It could be a peer. If you manage, do we have any managers in the room? If you manage, it might be somebody on your team that you want to give feedback to, maybe someone in another department. Someone you've been meaning to give a free to. So this one, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. And remember the process. What was the process? Okay? How many people are actually going to now deliver that free when they go back to their desk after this talk? That they'll actually deliver it. Okay, you can do better than that. Okay? All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Senia then, who's going to introduce us to the third tool. Go ahead.
So literally in the book, we talk about it as don't quit, just quit being an expert. And it's really when we're hearing from our clients, this project is extremely stressful. I'm frustrated at my own results. I've been really trying, or for example, in sales, I've gotten 6 no's and now I'm about to make a 7th call. It's just, what mental state should I be in? This was not a good week. So we all have these. I have these. You likely have these. What do? This is Jeff Bezos of Amazon saying, if you want to be inventive, you have to be willing to fail. He doesn't just say this. He says this in every interview that he gives. And if you talk to people at Amazon, and we did for the book, they say this is his main mantra, to encourage a culture pretty much of failure. But failure means trial and failure, trial and error. What do we mean by all this? Let's think about the 2 different ways that you can face the world. You can have a performance mindset, or you can have a learning mindset. A performance mindset is when you're thinking, all right, this is what I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to demonstrate mastery. I'm going to demonstrate competence. A learning mindset is when you're going to learn mastery and learn competence. It's a completely different way of figuring out where you're going. Now, as I show you the next quote, which is another of my favorite pieces of the book, just because it's so implementable, think about it in terms of yourself, when you can say something like this to yourself, and think about it in terms of when you can say something like this to somebody that you're working with together on a project. As you're working together on a project, you can describe a project this way. These are exact words that a researcher used. You'll probably learn a lot, but you'll probably make a bunch of mistakes, get a little confused, and maybe feel a little dumb at times. Now, what does that, I'm actually asking you this question, what does that make you think of when you get this, either when you say this to yourself or when you get this kind of instruction from somebody? What kind of mindset does that put you in? What? Relief. Why relief? You can't mess up much worse than that. Anything else? Kind of freedom to take risks. That's how I feel about it as well. And what happens if you don't say this to somebody? It's just not implied. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. There's nothing implied about this kind of attitude if you don't actually say it. At Joie de Vivre at Chip Conley's company, one of the things he did is he had a mistake of the month club. So he actually would reward people who had the biggest learning from a mistake. Who does this? A lot of actually companies do this. You do this. 37 Signals, which is a super company, does this. Amazon really, really invigorates their people to do this. But the part of it that you may not think about it as often, so even if you have thought about these kinds of concepts, how can I get into a learning mindset? How can I figure out if I'm messing up, how can I think about it as learning? One of the ways that we most love to think about this is how can you carve this kind of boomerang for others? How can you make others, by saying something like that, or by giving them kind of the permission and the freedom, how can you make others think about this kind of mindset? We're giving you one more exercise, and it's the last one. Why and why are we giving you these exercises? We told you you'd walk away with 3 tools, and we want you to practice them, even though we're only giving you 30 seconds to 2 minutes. But please turn to the person next to you, and let's talk about when taking on a learning mindset for yourself or for someone you work with would be helpful. 30 seconds per person. Okay, learning mindset. You and the learning mindset. What is something you heard from your partner that you might be able to implement? Or what's an insight that you have in terms of how you can get into the learning mindset? So the comment is, for example, in this presentation, just coming to it and having more of a learning mindset rather than critical thinking. I find that too, especially if you practice a sport or hobby. So I really love ballroom dancing. And sometimes I'll go to a beginner class, and it is somewhat beginner, but I can have that critical mindset, like, oh, that's boring, or that's boring. Or I can say, what else can I learn? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So questions, yep.
Earlier you mentioned something about that there was a big difference between managers, encouragement.
We don't know which way the arrow goes, but one of the things we will tell you is we had to throw out a whole piece of the data. We also had the managers take the assessment and say, I give frequent recognition and encouragement. And what happened was we then compared it with the employee's response, and they didn't match up. So the employee said, no, I'm not getting much, and the manager was saying, I give frequent recognition and encouragement. So really, we tossed out the manager feedback, because when it comes to frequent recognition and encouragement, whose opinion matters most? It's the receiver, right? That's receiving it. So just a quick recap on the tools. There's 31 tools in Profit from the Positive. We gave you just 3 in this last hour. Trick yourself into getting started, free, and then don't quit, just quit being an expert. Okay, you're in perf season, right? Here at Google? Yes, well, guess what? We've heard that performance reviews are really painful. We've heard it from managers, we've heard it from employees, we've heard it from HR folks, right? So we devote a whole chapter, actually, to performance reviews. We call it Change 'em or Chuck 'em. And one of the tools within this chapter is called Preview. Don't just review performance. And this really borrows from sports psychology around visualizing success. So if you're curious on how to make the dreaded performance review less painful, definitely read chapter 7. And then one other tool that we didn't get to is increase your odds. There's some research around when and where. Those of you that rely on others, you might be an individual contributor, right? And you don't necessarily have people that report to you, but you rely on others to get your work done. You need things from them. You're more apt to get what you need and get what you want if you give the person a triggering event and tell them where and when you'd like that piece of work delivered. So, if I say to you, Rebecca, will you please get me, that analysis, tomorrow? Twice as likely if I say to you, Rebecca, can you get me that analysis by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? In fact, even if you can email it to me or bring it to my office on a flash drive, whatever, twice as likely to get what I want. So a couple other free tools we just snuck in there if we had time. So here we go. This is our website, profitfromthepositive.com. There are a lot of free tools. This is someone that definitely has a learner mindset. She's going to be the next maybe CEO. Google, maybe. She'll break that glass ceiling, maybe, after all. But a lot of free tools there. We also have a Facebook page by the same name. And we'll also stay here, answer any other questions. We're going to be here for a while. We'll also be happy to inscribe your books for you. And really, thank you. It's been like such an honor to be here today. We can't tell you. Thank you for having us.